Hi everyone, it's Jerry. Let's have a look at another Leela Chess Zero game. Leela has white in this one, ID 464, running on a GTX 1060 GPU. On the black end, Houdini 6. Houdini 6 is the 2017 Season 10 Top Chess Engine Champion. Top rating for Houdini 6, 3600. However, running only on 2 cores for this game, which puts it at about 3380. Time controls 15 minutes each with a 1-second increment. So let's see how this one plays out. Opening wise, Italian game, 2 knights defense. Move 4, quick strike on f7. d5 takes, no recapture. This would invite the fried liver attack, queen f3, etc. In this game, it's knight a5, bishop b5 check, and, well, a couple pieces in black's house at the moment. Short-lived. They're kicked away with first c6 and h6. Decision time for the knight. 2 options, both are theory. Which one do you think Leela picks? Feel free to pause the video. Here we go. Knight h3. I'm not surprised to see this move. I say this because I've seen Leela play this e5 advance so many times to kick away the king knight. You can be sure if the knight is on f3, this would be inviting e4 with tempo. So white sidesteps this kind of advance, puts the knight on a silly square, and it's also accessible. Now, black has the option to take the knight out and damage the kingside structure, but places a greater weight apparently on maintaining the bishop pair. Gets on with development. Both sides castle, d3. White is up a pawn. Black is up a bit more development-wise, slight lead development-wise. Structurally, deficient, isolated pawns on the queen side for black. Both sides have a silly knight that need to be repositioned. The central structure tips in black's favor. 4th rank pawn versus a 3rd rank pawn. This will grant black more freedom of movement. Black has more space. In this game, for a great portion of it, white will be functioning on only 3 ranks, and in some instances only 2. Okay, from here, knight b7, knight c3, bishop b6, and king h1. At first glance, this move says to me, get out of the pin so you can play f4. Knight d6, there will be no f4. Knight g1, that was the idea, to vacate g1 for the knight, a piece that has been quite the traveler so far. He has officially done the cycle. Now, if f4 is played in this position, e4 is a good reply. Position opens up some, black is the slightly a better developed side, better pieces. And where exactly would the bishop go, the queen go? I don't know. Knight g1 in the game. If black insists on trying to crack the position open at this stage, notice how that would give up a wonderful square for the bishop at least. There is no pawn on f4 in this case. So no e4. Instead, rook e8. And I believe on this move 14, we have reached an original position. I believe a couple games have seen this move, most recently in 2014, with rook e8, original position. How will Leela handle it? Let's find out. b3, bishop d4. We have the dark square bishops exchanged. Not a good idea to go hunting the bishop. The knight will be better than the bishop once placed on d4. Queen c7, move 18. Now, if black tried to play e4 here, this would mean the queens have to be exchanged, right? You have to get the pawn back, and you can't avoid the queen exchange at the same time. It's imperative black maintain the queens. Being down a pawn, you have to keep the queens on board. So from here, queen c7. What does Leela play next? Feel free to pause the video. Okay. In the game, small move, f3. Now, this is a position I let Stockfish sit on for quite a bit. Stockfish doesn't come up with f3 in this position. I really like f3. This isn't a tactical game. No great fireworks in this one. Strategy is the big topic in this one. And what is f3 doing? f3 is buying white time to play catch-up. White still needs to get a lot more moves in. Queen d2, rook e1, solve the fianchettoed knight riddle, this knight on g1. Still a lot of work to be done. Seems a bit awkward to do this. You take away the knight, a square from the knight, the bishop. The bishop now has no moves after f3. But it buys time. It doesn't allow this position to crack open so easily. Now, let me just illustrate something for you here. Some suggestion by the Stockfish 9 engine, instead of f3, is to play a4, knight f3, and knight to d2. This would allow e4. Let me flip the board here to give you an idea of how scary this would be for white. Soon, both rooks will occupy the center files. Compare the knights. We know whose stand better. And where exactly is the queen's, the white queen's, safe home? I don't know. I don't think it's a wise choice to have this position open up. So, flip the board. f3. White is buying time to complete development. Queen d2. Let's see how white organizes. Rook a to e1, bishop d2. Knight e2, not to take the knight. This would not be a good idea. White on move, capturing the knight in this position would not be good because white would be mending the black structure, repairing the black structure. And there would be two wonderful jumping points for the knight. No way. In the game, it's knight c4, knight c3. Pair of knights are exchanged. And king to g1. He did his big job, going to h1, opening up g1 for the knight. A little bit more central, off of the light squares. The bishop won't bother him now. And from here, knight e6, queen a5. Little technical point, queen a5. Why not offer a queen exchange? We know black should decline it, and does with queen to c6. Now, once the queen moves to, let's say, d2, maybe at some stage there'd be a nice move by the knight with tempo on the queen or something else. At least the knight won't have pressure on it when it's on a5. Just a tiny detail there. Rook f2 is opening up f1 for the bishop. The bishop on d1 did a good job restricting the knight when it was on d4, and it looks to do similar from f1. This knight is ready to pounce on the f4 square. The bishop will be responsible for keeping it under control. From here, h5, bishop e2, bishop f1. What's with this idea here? This h-pawn. What is black looking to do? Secure a knight on f4. This move, h4, should not be met with h3. This would allow the knight to sit there and not be challenged. White needs to keep open the option to play g3 to scare the knight away. Queen d4, queen d2, knight f4, and rook e4. Interesting moment in the game is this point. Bishop d5, rook returns to e1. Bishop f7, repetition. No, game on. g3, knight h5, don't even touch this pawn. A push, a capture, none of the above. This pawn needs to stay put controlling f4, so rook g2. Now, this is giving up the f3 pawn, it appears, but this pawn is poison. In the game, bishop d5 is played. What would be the issue with queen takes f3? The queen is going to be short on squares. Rook e4 could follow, and I'll just play out a couple of moves what the computer is pointing out. Chop, chop, queen is short on squares, knight d6 with the fork. If, let's say, queen h7, setting up some discovery, there's rook h4, and After g5, you can already take like this. This isn't even a threat. There's a big problem on h5. So this pawn is poison. Can't take f3. In the game, bishop d5. So pop quiz to you. White to move. What does Leela play next? Feel free to pause the video. Okay, in the game, we have rook e4. Giving up the exchange. How many of you came up with that one? Bishop takes rook. Take towards the center. Especially now that white is without one rook. You don't want to have this file open up. Keep it closed if possible. King f7, bishop e2, rook h8, bishop takes knight. Yeah, I like this sequence. You take out the knight and now follow up with g4. Make sure this does not open up for the rooks. After g4, we have a rook move. One thing I question is, can black try and keep these pawns disjointed? Because after rook h6, h3 is played, and this guy is secure. This pawn isn't able to get to h3. Can h3 be played here as an in-between move? No. Why? Because of rook f2. The rook is under fire, this pawn is in a pin, and this rook has a responsibility. Right? If this rook goes here, he could actually take the pin. And if the rook backs up, knight takes e5. That would be pretty painful. Okay, you can't insert h3 at this stage. In the game, rook h6, h3. And let's just stare at this position for a moment. A lot has changed. Material imbalance. White has a knight and pawn versus a rook. However, white is the one who stands better. Why? Well, where are there good files for the rooks? There's a half-open D file. There's a half-open B file, but both of them bite on granite. There isn't really a productive role for either rook. This knight, on the other hand, is a wonderful piece. A knight from the E3 square, as an example, has great jumping points, d5, c4, f5. So, how to break down the black position? First, knight e3, rook h6, I'm repositioning now. Black is securing f5, rook f8, rook f3. Seems a little bit mysterious. That was my first impression. What is rook f3 doing? Maybe queen to f2. In this game, we have queen to e1. Okay, similar. Putting pressure on h5. Now, there are a couple of moments in this endgame that are nearby that I'd like to elaborate on. This is one of them. How exactly to cope with this pressure on h4? In the game, we have g5, a move that, you know, makes me cringe some, this giving up the f5 square to the knight. You know, you play g6 to guard f5, and a move or two later, you're playing g5. Is it worthwhile to do this, to give up this great square to the knight? I think it is. And this is why I think it's worthwhile to do this. If you don't play g5, that means you have to babysit this pawn. I think the rook is much more inconvenienced than the white queen. And there's something more going on than that. At some stage, white can play g5. So, for example, let me just make a couple moves. Let's say queen f2, king g7, and knight to d5. At some stage, g5 can hit really hard. And white can prepare that type of pawn break. White could get the king all the way over here, and note what's over here on the queen side. A very nice home for the white king. Where is black's home? The black king is homeless. Black needs to be very careful not only about losing h4, but also this g5 move. The structure can be broken down and lines can be opened up. White can somehow get at the black king. So white has time to do this kind of thing. Tuck the king away over here and then maybe go for a timely g5. Maybe even put the queen on c3, exerting pressure on e5 with a g5 move. Is it worth the trouble, I think it's best how black does it, to give up one big square to the knight. At least the rook is free, and black doesn't have to worry about a g5 break. Continuing, a4, doubled rooks, queen c3, king e2, queen c4, and now a mysterious move and a homework assignment for those of you who are out of school and upset that you haven't been receiving any homework. This is an important one. Well, this is sophisticated. I don't know the answer to the following question. Why does Houdini 6 play rook to d4 here? This is running into knight f5, fork. White gets the exchange back, and in this ending is up a pawn. This is how play develops in this game. Now, my question to you, those of you who are looking for a homework assignment, is what would be the winning plan for white if black doesn't play rook to d4, but rather plays, let's say, rook f7 and overprotects f6? This is a position I've messed around with for over an hour, and I don't have a clear answer to it. This is what I came up with. I think this may be one of the better tries for white to try and break down the black position. One thing I thought about was maybe playing on the queen side, getting in a5, rook a4, and positioning the rook on c4, exerting pressure on this weak pawn, maybe getting in b4. But this can always be shut down with a5. And then I tried one other plan. Something like this, organizing the pieces where I might not have the exact move order, but I'm just going to make some moves here to illustrate. I had the queen here, the rooks connected, and something like this. Let's put the queen on c1 and the rook here. This was my idea, to have this position for the pieces, maybe even putting the queen on, let's say, d2. Tuck the king away in this nice little home over here, and then finally go for this sacrifice. Capture on f6, capture on g5, capture on h4. It looks a little bit crazy, right? At first glance, black has an extra rook, but white has a secure king. White has a couple passed pawns, and the black king. The white still has a couple of major pieces on the board. How do you assess this position? Just to give you an idea, it's around minus 0.7, tipping in black's favor. That's not much. Would this be maybe the best try for white? I don't know. That's what I came up with. Some sacrifice on the f6 square, giving up the knight and mopping up these kingside pawns, getting the king over here in his cozy home. We don't have that. In the game, it's rook to d4. White picks up the exchange. And let's see how white tries to convert this. b5, a6. Eventually, the queens are exchanged. White is up a pawn, and ideally placed behind the passer. The kings now contribute. White breaks down the structure some. a5. And yeah, white is improving the king position, and will be able to now pivot on the b6 square, which allows white to target the base point. f6 is going to fall. White gives up the a pawn, but the white rook is much faster. There goes the g pawn, and the h pawn will fall next. This game does not go too much further, right down to move 81 after king to e7. This game is over. White wins. If it did continue, this is one of the many ways it could play out straight to checkmate. It's a simple way to do it: exchange rooks and win the king and pawn endgame. White is simply up too many pawns. Straight to checkmate. One of the many ways this one could have ended, but move 81 is as far as it got after king to e7. Game over. White wins. So, impressive, This is a lengthy game, the 15+1 time control. As usual, feel free to leave any feedback to this video. I'm really encouraging some feedback to this one, especially with those two, well, that last question, that homework assignment. Yeah, I really don't have a solution. I'm not sure what the way forward is if black isn't giving up the exchange with that rook to d4 move. So any insight you could provide, I'll certainly be on the lookout for that. And yeah, as usual, feel free to leave any feedback to this one in the comment section below. Hope you enjoyed it and maybe took a thing or two away. That's all for now. Take care.